first day of any ethical hacking course, students learn the words white hat and black hat to denote good and bad hackers, respectively. However, the world is not in black and white. In this presentation, we're going to delve into the gray. Hacktivism is a term used to talk about computers or computer networks that are used to attack people for political agendas, usually in the interest of free speech or human rights. Now, most people are familiar that hacking is used by somebody who wants to attack somebody on a computer or get some information that they're not supposed to have. But what most people don't know is that hacking actually started not with computers but with phones. People realized that they could imitate the frequencies that the phones were outputting and imitate them so accurately that they could make long-distance calls without paying any money. These people were originally known as phreaks. Now, at MIT has a certain club that allowed people to play with different parts, and a man named Stuart Nelson realized that he could imitate the frequency of a dial tone well enough to successfully replicate the procedure. Another man named John Draper created a blue box that could imitate all of these different frequencies to allow anybody to make free calls whenever they wanted. And he also realized that the whistle that comes in the Captain Crunch boxes can imitate these frequencies as well, so he created a hacker alias known as Captain Crunch. This is the first known instance of a hacker alias ever being used. His employees later ended up being Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, the founders of Apple. In October of 1989, a virus hits many different computers in the U.S. government, including those in NASA, with a worm called the WANK worm. Now, this worm stands for Worms Against Nuclear Killers, and this was the first instance of hacktivism, as referred to by Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. And this worm attacked different computers in the DCnet, and it originated from Australia. But the point is that it was the first instance of a playful nature of hacktivism, which is a theme that will continue in later hacktivism. Another group called the Zippies were sent out in what's called an email bomb, which is a form of distributed denial of service attack. And what they did was they would send a bunch of computers, have a bunch of computers send a ton of emails to different computers to crash them. And they did this because the Prime Minister had made a law that outlawed rapes, and they didn't like this very much. So they did this attack on November 5th, which is Guy Fawkes Day. And this is also another theme that would later become important in different hacktivism. So now I'm going to introduce my next person who will continue the presentation.
My name is Alex, and I'll be covering modern hacktivists in the FIU Ethical Hacking Research Project, Group 14. The biggest modern ethical hackers were the Cult of the Dead Cow. Unlike the Zippies and the Australians with the WANK, this was actually not a one-time thing. Cult of the Dead Cow started in '84, and it became like a fun organization. It was just pranks, and it was fun, and it was taking down people they disagreed with, and then it became strictly political. They coined the term hacktivism in 1996, and Sardistic and a lot of these guys, what made them separate is they actually made tools. They made the man-in-the-middle attack SMBC. They made Microsoft exploits such as back office and all those. But also they juggled international hacktivists. They were in China at the same time they were fighting Scientology at home. At the same time they were doing things in the Arab Spring. So unlike the older hacktivists, these guys, and they're still around. Go to Dead Cow does a little bit more on internet rights, freedom of information. Trying Frontier Foundation, they do a lot to promote connectivity and the free flow of ideas. Like we said, they started out fun. They would release ridiculous press statements. Pretty much, they released one saying L. Ron Hubbard was Heimlich Hitler, come back to start the Fourth Reich. They would take down websites in a fun way, comics, and then they became political. They went against Scientology because there was a news blog that former Scientologists could go to vent against the things the church did, and Scientology used its money and influence to get that blog wiped out. This was directly against the CDC's view of free information. So they started just taking down Scientology's websites. The Hong Kong Blondes was an operation they did in China, and they're still involved in China. They did a Google protest because Google conceded to the modern China's firewalls. So they've been in China for a while. Towards the end, they would split. The Ninja Strike Force and Hacktivismo were both sister corporations of the Cult of the Dead Cow. Ninja Strike Force and the Ninja Strike Force Dojo was kind of like a teaching position. Hacktivismo became strictly hacktivist. 96, they formed and they declared the Declaration of Internet Rights based on the United Nations, declarations of human rights. It valued things such as privacy, secrecy, free flow of information. In 2004, Christopher Poole founded a website called 4chan. It was based on the Japanese Fubata channel 2chan. This was basically a pretty bare bones image board, but there was very little moderation on there. It had tons of boards. They had one for anime, one for sports, one for guns. They had one for random anything goes. A lot of adult forums, and they had an iBoard called the Invasion Forum. People would post IP addresses and websites. People would just start taking them down. Moot was his alias, and WT Snacks was a system administrator, and they were just like the CDC. They did a lot of pranks. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. There's one where they hacked an epilepsy website with lots of flash images. There's one where they rigged NASA posts, they rigged Mountain Dew contests, really anything online that they kind of saw as fair game. Anonymous would eventually be born on this site due to the aggregation of all kinds of people on the site. This picture here, if you can see it, it's Times 2009 most influential people. Not only did 4chan hack it, so Moot would be the #1 person, they also hacked the next 20 spaces to clear out a few of their memes. I'm going to say LOL Cats, Rick Astley, Leet Speak, pretty much any internet culture. Advice Animals directly came from 4chan first. Anonymous is a internet group that was born on 4chan, and they blew up. Fox News called them hackers on steroids. They just like the CDC, they started out with a lot of fun, and then they became political. They were behind attacking government websites that censored. They had a huge blow with Scientology called Project Chanology, where they took down the Church of Scientology. They published classified documentations. They brought to light a lot of the grievances and crimes of the Church of Scientology. They had, unlike other groups, they also had their own tools, like they call it Dead Cow. They have the low orbit ion cannon. They have the Anon operating system. They have all kinds of the Ascendus vulnerability scanner to scan websites for possible injections. Their logo is the Guy Fawkes mask, which ties back to the Zippies and to pretty much counter-government in general. They would split into dozens and dozens of factions because anybody could join Anonymous, anyone could represent Anonymous. There's two official splits, Anon Ops and LulzSec. We're not really covered because they're just more hackers than hacktivists, but some of LulzSec's tools are used a little later. There's an anonymous group in China. There's one in Palestine. There's one in Israel. There's one in Brazil. They release these toolkits, just like the gestures of the CDC, that take down websites that they disagreed with. WikiLeaks is a website that publishes state secrets. They were known for publishing over 400,000 documents of classified United States information, which revealed basically were war crimes committed by the United States government. Julian Assange, who we spoke about earlier, is the head of the award-winning nonprofit organization, And Anonymous fought very closely with WikiLeaks to publish and reveal cables, all kinds of classified information. And this goes back to the CDC's and Anonymous's view that information should be free and the free flow of information is paramount. When WikiLeaks published close to 500,000 documents showing United States illegal activities in the Middle East, all the donations were seized. Visa, MasterCard, Amazon, nobody would work with them anymore. This was under mounting political pressure because Visa, MasterCard, they'll still let you donate to the Ku Klux Klan. They just wouldn't let you donate to WikiLeaks. Eventually, they all got, all the bans were lifted, and WikiLeaks would go on to publish more and more classified information. Eventually, WikiLeaks split with Anonymous. LulzSec hacked a number of security firms, and WikiLeaks published the data raw, which led to the conviction of several of the members. WikiLeaks also put up a paywall, like JSTOR, which you have to pay to access information. This was the final straw for Anonymous. This went against everything in internet freedom. It went against information should be free, and eventually Anonymous would split with WikiLeaks.
Hello, good day. My name is Kyle Gorin, and today I'll talk to you about technical hacker tools. Normally, many of these hacking groups run a vulnerability scanner to determine which hacking tool is best for them. Today we'll talk about LOIC. LOIC and HOIC go hand in hand. LOIC is a DDoS attack. It's one of the most powerful hacks capable of completely taking down a server down. In this way, the server will not be able to handle the request of a valid user. With a DDoS attack, many computer systems connected to the internet will try to overflow a server with false requests, leading to a server disturbance. There are many ways in which an attacker can enact this attack on a server, system over the network, or on the internet. Some hackers try this attack with their own coded tools, while others use previously available tools. A LOC attack is also a weapon of choice implemented by many hacker groups, also known as the infamous Anonymous group, who have claimed the rights for many high-profile hacking attacks, among them hacking against Sony, the FBI, and other U.S. security agencies. LOIC was originally developed as a stress testing application before becoming available within the public domain. The tool is also to perform a simple DOS attack by sending a large sequence of UDP, TCP, or HTTP requests to a large target server. It's a very easy tool to use, even by those lacking any basic knowledge of the computer. An amateur hacker need only to select some easy options such as address of target system and method of attack, and click the button to start attack. The LOIC version used by the Anonymous group attack was different than the original LOIC. It had an option to connect the client to the IRC, which is the Internet Relay Chat. This allowed the tool to be completely remotely using the IRC protocol. A botnet system is a system of compromising computer systems connected to each other via the internet, and this tool is used in most LOIC attack tools. The HOIC, which is the high orbit ion cannon tool, is the same as LOIC, just that it hides the user's IP address. Next, I'll talk to you about cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting is also known as SCC or CSS. It's generally believed to be one of the most common application layer hacking techniques. If a constant trailing hacker uses these techniques to gain access to websites and web applications that contain credit card information, social security information, and medical documents, and make it unexpected users susceptible to identity theft. Cross-site scripting is a hacking technique that pulls vulnerabilities in the code of a web application. It allows an attacker to manipulate malicious content from an end user and receive of data from the victim being exploited. A server generates both text and HTML markup, and web pages contain both. The web pages that generate dynamic pages are not equipped with a complete control as to how their inputs are interpreted by the client. When malicious content invades a dynamic page, the website or client cannot recognize that this has occurred, and preventive measures cannot be taken. Next, I'll talk to you about SQL injections. SQL injections are one of the many web attack mechanisms used by hackers to acquire data illegally from organizations. Very similar to cross-site scripting, it's perhaps one of the most common application layer techniques used today. It's a type of attack that seeks out improper coding on your web application that allows hackers to inject SQL commands into, say, a login form to allow them to gain access to the data within your database. A SQL injection attack consists of insertion of SQL query via the input data from the client to the application. A successful SQL injection exploit can read sensitive data from the database and modify functions such as insertion, update, deleting of database data. The severity of SQL injection attacks depends solely on the attacker's skill and imaginary genius, and to a lesser extent, defense in depth countermeasures such as low privilege connections to the database server and so on. In general, SQL injections are a very high impact severity. Thank you very much. I'll pass it on to my next presenter.
My name is Carlos Hernandez, and I'll be discussing hacker tools. Current days, the internet is widely available. There's a lot of information putting out there, and I'll be discussing Montego, which is one of the tools that most hackers use these days to collect the data information from a lot of either individual or from other companies. Basically, there's not really a real hacking going on. It's just that anything that you put out there, it's being shown on any website that it's being posted to. So let's say, for example, like if you have a Twitter account, Facebook account, or anything that you could put your information to, pictures, it can be collected by Montego. But what it basically does is snoops around for all the information related to your name or any computer that you have connected your information to. And what's this called? Botnet, which is an army it's a zombie army. It's basically a whole bunch of internet computers that are connected through with the owners being unaware of it. It has been set up to forward transmission, including spam or viruses, to other computers on the internet. All those computers, in effect, is a robot or a bot that serves the wishes of the user through all the home-based computers that are connected through the script. The computers are co-opted to serve in a zombie army as often as those owners fail to provide any security or any effective firewalls and other safeguards. The next tool that I want to discuss is a remote file inclusion, or RFI. It's a vulnerability that is most often found on websites. It allows an attacker to include a remote file, usually through a script through a web server. The vulnerability occurs due to the user supplied input without proper validation. This can lead to something as minimal as outputting the content to a file or a more serious event.
Unlike the groups we just talked about, the Jester is a lone hacker or a hacktivist. He doesn't really work in groups. He's completely by himself. He has a bit of a patriotic flair. Everything he does, according to him, is more for America than for the freedom of information or for the free flow of ideas. For example, he takes down several Taliban recruitment websites. He takes down all kinds of propaganda websites. He does some Syrian newspapers. He also took down WikiLeaks for publishing classified United States information. He's a bit more conservative. Normally, anyone in the hacker scene is, any mixture of anacro, liberal, cryptologist. He's just completely conservative. He posts on a lot of pro-gun forums and a lot of solid American things. He does not get along with the other hackers we mentioned. Like I said, he took down WikiLeaks for publishing classified information. He took down 4chan for their DDoS attacks on the CIA and Department of Commerce. He outed several LulzSec members to the British Authority for the same reasons. He's a military veteran, and he was a result of a military report on asymmetrical warfare. The reason it was asymmetrical was because it was one person, the Jester, versus taking down or basically negating hundreds of terrorists. The Jester has a toolbox he released, or a battle chest. Several software he made himself, Fox One, Acronis. One of them is called Xerxes. Xerxes is interesting because it's a DDoS attack like Thor's Hammer or the LOIC, but it doesn't require botnets. It works from a single Linux-based computers, and unlike the LOIC, it takes down websites permanently. A lot of people say that it pretty much just makes the terms of service expire, but it pretty much takes down websites off the internet for good. The interesting note about Xerxes, and we put it in our report, is it was never released to the public, but it has Twitter and Facebook integration. So there's a thought that he might release it eventually. The picture mentioned above is the Jester's computer in the Smithsonian Museum, in the Smithsonian Spy Museum, along with James Bond and all MI6 guys. So he's more of a hacktivist, accepted probably because he plays for the government, but he's an accepted hacktivist because even though he takes down websites and commits DDoS and all this, he claims to do it for good. He claims to interrupt terrorist recruitment and obstruct lines of flow.
So in conclusion, hacktivism can be used for good or bad, but generally speaking, governments don't like it when hacktivists try to reveal their secrets. But we can be sure that as long as governments try to hide information from their people, hacktivists will try to get that information out to the public. I'm Jonathan Wall, and this has been Hacktivism.